to put the new gaskets on. I've got the first one on here. It's all cleaned up and in place. And now just making sure that there's no silicone from past jobs or anything like that. You just got to clean all of this all the way around to make sure it's ready for the new gasket. Then once you've done that, when we're preparing to put the new gasket in, the common leak points, my secret weapon, my BMW mechanic friend has told me that the common leak points for these are, this is your oil filler cap here. So this is the front of the engine. At the front of the engine, these points here where the corners are, he suggested to put a little bit of silicone on each of those on both sides of the gasket because they're common leak points. And at the back of the engine, the same, here and here. You can see there's even little channels through that one. So you put a blob of silicone on there and there as you put it into place in order to help it from leaking, because it's a common leak point at the back of the engine. You don't need to silicone the whole gasket. The rubber gasket will seal it as long as your sealing faces are in good condition and all clean, but you do need in these corners. Also, something to check here is these spark plug tubes. See above the V and below the V. These are actually where the coils sit, where you pull your spark plugs in and out of. There's an O-ring at the top and the bottom of those. Two middle ones are in under the Vanos motor. But you need to just feel with your fingernail, just feel those O-rings. If it hasn't been leaking and the O-rings are quite soft, then you can probably leave them in place. But if they're hard at all, or obviously if there's been a leak, then replace those O-rings as well. Because you don't want any leaks once you've replaced the tapper cover gasket. So there's O-ring top and bottom of those 4 spark plug tubes as well. Okay, so back here on the engine, the tips, the tricks, the things to look out for, particularly this spring here at the back of the engine. This is a classic for ripping, as you're lifting the tapper cover on, for ripping the gasket off. And if you don't get the gasket sitting in there, of course, it's going to leak out the back of your motor, be an absolute disaster. You have to do everything over. So really important as you get this on. And when the tapper cover comes on, you sort of have to come down low, down here, and then come up and over and be very, very mindful of that spring. You see you've got to fit in between this hose here. There's just a whole lot of juggling that needs to happen to get it up and on and in and flat. When the gasket goes in, and again on these spots here, a little bit more here because they've actually got little channels that I want to fill up and around, and then we sit the gasket in place. Around, just following it, you've got little lugs on the gasket there where that hole is, you see, and following it around, just getting that slot in all the way around, just making sure it sits flat and sits down. If there's anywhere that pops up, because you're going to have to muck around and lift this into place, I would put a little bit of silicone under that as well, because you really want this to stay in place while you're getting it into position and putting it down. So there we go, almost done. Just poke that in all the way around. These gaskets are absolutely made to suit. Like that. I'll put a link through to gaskets in the description so you can find all the bits and pieces that you need. That's it, that's in place. Now I'm just going to tip it upside down. As I said, if a bit falls out and it's a bit floppy, I'll put a little bit of silicone under, simply so that when we tip this upside down and put it into place, we want everything to stay exactly where it is. So again, just a little bit of silicone on the sharp points, which can tend to be leak points, over the back, here and here, there and there on the corners. I've chosen to put it here rather than on the gasket, because as I'm lifting the gasket in, I don't want it to bump and get silicone all over everything and make a mess. So this way, it's more out of the way until the gasket comes and sits right on top. So okay, we're ready to lift that rocker cover on. Tilt it down, come down here nice and low. Very mindful of this spring at the back and that hose coming between the two. Plop it in, and then we're ready to do it up. So even to the extent of getting in a mirror and having a look down here at your gasket, that's the vac pump down there. But the one I want to see there is that, see the blue gasket makes it easy to see. That's beautifully in place. Perfect. Okay, that's ready now just to locate all of your bolts and then pull it down. Now remember, you're pulling down onto a plastic cover, so it's not going to be much at all. I don't have the exact torque spec, but it'll be somewhere between 5 and 10 Newton meters. So when I took this off, it wasn't tight. Don't reef it down because you got yourself a plastic tap. And started, you start from the middle. So basically you work your way out from the middle out just very loosely And then the same again, middle out, tighten up a little bit, middle out, tighten out a little bit. Take your time, get it all down nice and flat. So we're starting to put the car back together now in the loom. We've dropped this down from where we had it tied up. And the trick to getting this back in, this is the coil loom. It's got the wires around the front as well. But the trick to getting this in, you see this slot here, and there's a metal thing here. Start with that, because the plastic slides into the metal like that. And then when that's properly in position, come over here and you'll get a click like that, so that is then in position. You see all of your plugs now just want to go back into their right places. Everything's sitting exactly where it needs to be. So that's the secret. Start with that slide first and then clip. And you know, don't forget your earths to go on here. These positive wires can be attached after we've got more of the top of the car on. It goes past and then it comes down. So with these guys, when you see that, it's a press in and then pull down to get them out, not the other way around. Assembling the electrics, all these cables down here over the Vanos and up here, these earth plugs need to go back on. See, there's a thread there that goes down. You've got 4 bolts that are very, very similar. There's 2 of these and 2 of these. The longer bolts go into the front, holding this bracket, and down below, holding a bracking plate. The shorter bolts, these guys here, are your earth strap one, holding an earth strap on either side of that. So now, once I had all of this back together, I got these leads back on, everything back together. I wanted to test it before I go putting everything back on, make sure there's not anything wrong. So before I put the cover on, I actually left the coils all unplugged and just turned it over. Just let it turn over without spark, without it firing, just to check everything turning over. And now it's a matter of putting things back together. There's a cover to go back on here. The suspension, just undoing the E-bolt up the top and pressing that right in. I was just working on that now. There you go, hear that click and come into position. So that circle, you can see it there, that circle fits into the right place on that bar like that, and then doing the E-bolt up, E14 that is, do that up. Now these are suspension parts, so do them up tight, yeah, and up the top. And then that little black plug that you've got, of course, that you took out, is the one that covers up that cross member. So the first piece of this big infrastructure to go back in is this big weather tray here. The secret for it is up high, lifted in on an angle. There's little feet that'll clip in under the rubber and under the edge there, lift it in. And then back here, if you follow this weather strip around, there's 2 screws to line up here and up the other end. And these here just clip into place. That rubber pulls up and over and it clips in. So very simple positioning there. And then screw on the cabin filter, dung, 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 back onto there. You need to fit this little valve here, and these little clips go in this. This is like a rain gutter here for the water to run. There's little clips, they clip back on, and that is a insert, turn and spin. Just line up the lugs, a little sensor that goes there. And now next we plug these guys in. These are all slide in. The back one lifts up and slides over like that. It's just a matter of lining all 3 up, and do the back one first, obviously. And then the front one, this clip slides in here and here and there. And then those 2 will click in, and you are looking good. Okay, so the back one's in, and this one, that's it, clicked into place. Things are now all back where they're supposed to be. So next, we're getting these covers left and right. Okay, so there's one. I find it best, believe it or not, to put this little rubber slip on first, and then clip down the clips here and here. It will sit down then where you want it to. It needs to go down over this edge. So that on first, and then clip those 2 on. That's in perfect, and we'll take the other one over. You can just sit them down to see which side is which. They are quite different. They're not interchangeable. Side, exactly the same. Clips here and here. Put this little rubber system up first. That'll get it down right. And just make sure this is quite removable. It might have jumped off. Make sure that that rubber is in place. It just goes up against this here. Make sure that's sitting where it's supposed to. Of course, you've remembered to put this little vanity cover on before you put this tray back on. If you did forget, if you just get a standard 10 ring spanner, one with a little bit of a dip on it, you'll be able to get in under there and do that up. There's two 10mm bolts hold that in place. And then the cold air intake goes on the front, 2 Torx screws here and here, and your engine bay is going to look like that again, like it should. So there you go, job done, well done, and now take it out for a test drive.